Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung. With me, Kindar, the Tiger writes, and Ty, the Tiger supervises. Today, we are doing chapter 32. You can stop screaming, silly. The voice was light, moving around him. There's nothing for you to hit here. Help! Tibs reached for the voice, but there was only more wind screaming all around him as he fell. I am. The giggle forced him to open his eyes and look for who was speaking. The form was wisps of air and dust ever shifting among them. It looked small and fragile. The dust gave her form petite, slim, providing shadows where it didn't quite resemble a person. Tibbs reached for the form, hoping she was solid. He needed to stop this fall before he hit the ledge. She flitted away. A game! Stop! He reached for her, and reaching for her sent him into a tumble. Catch me if you can, she sing-sang, and then all that was left was the howling of the wind. There had to be some way to stop his fall. If she wasn't going to help, it was up to him to. You didn't chase me, she said, disappointed. I thought we had a game. He reached for her, and she giggled, staying out of reach. Come back, he called. I need to get it. It was out. It was there. It had to be, within her. He just had to get her to stay still long enough to make it out. Oh, it's you. She was over him, and he waggled his arm until he had the wind, until the he waggled his arm until he had the wind turn him over, but he couldn't make her out. You made it! She was on his to his side. You came under him. I'm so happy you came. He bit back his annoyance, remembering he had to treat her with respect. Even if she sounded like a child, she was an element. She was air. He spread an arm. He used the wind to turn him over until he sort of faced her. Stopping his turn proved more difficult, but she followed him, giggling as he worked to settle his position. He ended on his side compared to the direction of the wind. He looked around. There was nothing. No ledge, no ground. Just as there had only been water and earth, there was nothing other than air and the dust that let him make her form out easier. I need to slow down. Please, can I have it? Why did she stay out of his reach? Where was the shadow of the shape? The old meanie said I shouldn't give it to you, she said. Tibbs thought she crossed her arm over her chest. He was all, he must earn it. She lowered her voice and spoke slowly. Tibbs chuckled at her attempt to imitate Earth. I was so bored. He's so boring. He never plays games. She giggled and was gone. He maneuvered himself, saw her on his side, upside down compared to him. Was he falling up? Was he falling at all? If there was nothing to fall toward, was it still falling? Or was it like when he floated in the lake in his mind? He groaned. Why was this so complicated? She giggled and he focused on her. If he wasn't going to hit anything, he needed to find the shadow and get it. It was why he was here. He reached for her, his hand open, He reached for her, his hand opened. It caught the wind and he was tumbling again, screaming in fear. He got the fear under control, then fought the wind to steady himself, the exercise leaving him panting. Are you not playing any more? The air asked, disappointed. Just let me catch my breath, he said. I'll try again afterward. She laughed. Catch your breath! She laughed harder, tumbling away. Why did you let it get away from you? She steadied herself effortlessly and drifted back. She reached within her and gathered the dust into a form. Is that your breath? Tip stared. Of course. It hadn't been dust. Dust was earth. It didn't belong here. He opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped himself. What would happen if he lied to air? Nothing good, he expected. No, it isn't, but I still need it. No, she said, all trace of humor gone. You don't. This will unmake you, little thing of human. She gazed at it. It unmade those who tried before. What is it? Tib asked. She looked at him as if surprised he was there, giggled, and flitted away. The prize! Tibbs was too slow to reach for her, but as he shifted to an angle against the wind, he noticed he was moving closer to her. Or maybe she was the one gliding back toward him. He wished there was a building so he could tell what was going on. He flew by her, air waving as she giggled. He turned and extended an arm to catch the wind and stopped himself. He turned, extended an arm to catch the wind and stopped himself. He lost sight of her in the distance, but her giggling reached him. Was he slowing or not? Since it seemed. Oh, I see. I see what. Oh, extended an arm to stop himself. That's what I was going for here. Was he slowing or not? Since it seemed like he needed to give the wind a resistance to move, he called his earth essence and carefully extended it from his arm, widening them. He ground his teeth in focus as the wind tried to rip the earth from him, but he thought he felt it slow. I think that's cheating, she said, closer. She didn't sound angry, just pensive. I'm a rogue, he answered. That's sort of what we do. She was before him, the wind at his back. If he tried reaching for the shadow, she'd fly away, if the wind didn't send him tumbling first. He needed to surprise her, so he could act before she did. First, he needed to close the distance between them, which meant getting more wind under him. He still had some in his reserve, but he wasn't sure how much more he could maintain against the wind. He studied Air, who watched him, amused. She hadn't said or done anything. She was watching him, keeping pace. He had an idea, a way to cheat again, but if she was too fast, it would leave him with nothing else to try. Still, it wasn't like he'd win Air's game if he was the way he was going. He pushed out as much of his water essence to the edge of the earth and quickly iced it. The wind ripped it away almost as soon as it formed, and the shock caused him to lose hold of the earth, but the result was air crashing through him. He grabbed the shadow as it felt it. He grabbed the shadow and felt it meld into him. The void expanded. A third reserve formed on its surface between earth and water. Air laughed. Only one more to go. Oh, Tibs! Air called, giggling. Took some effort, but he turned himself to face the wind, narrowing his eyes to find her. He barely made her out, now that she was just air. She waved at him. Mind the landing! The what? Tibs hit something hard, then darkness. Tibs opened his eyes slowly. His eyelids were so heavy. Maybe he should go back to sleep. There you are, a soft voice said, a man's voice, gentle, caring. A face came into view, wrinkles screened, hair much more gray than brown, and a beard more brown than gray, trimmed to a point. You gave us something of a scare. How are you feeling? His eyes. There was something wrong with the man's eyes. Bibbs thought he should be worried, but he was so tired. The pupils seemed to float into nothingness. Not darkness. The opposite. No, that wasn't right either. It wasn't light. It was. Tibbs couldn't find the words. It reminded him of when he tried to define his essence and only came up with an approximation of what it really was. Only here, he couldn't even come up with that. The pupil floated among the suggestion of irises. Tibbs? Karina called. Then she was next to him. You're alive! Are you okay? I was so scared you died. I was so scared you'd die. The man chuckled. He was alive when I arrived, child. Did you trust me so little? You thought I'd fail you? No, no, of course not. She sounded flustered. Thank you so very much. What happened? Tibbs asked, confused. Why would she think he'd die? Who was the man? Why was his eye so something? You fell, Jekyll said from the other side. Tell me, how does a rogue lose his footing? You're like a wall spider, always climbing things. How did you fall? And why were you at the cliff's edge to start with? Looking, Tip said, smiling at the memory of the view. Did you look? It's so beautiful. We were a little busy watching you fall off the cliff, the fighter said. The cliff! Tip sat as the rest came to him, and then the impact. So much pain in one instant. He ran his hand over himself. Everything seemed to be intact. There was no pain. He looked at the smiling man. At the smiling man Okay. He looked at the smiling man with the eyes that were so much something he couldn't define them, as if whatever color it had been was purified to the point it no longer registered. The white robe he wore finally triggered memories of story. You're a cleric. The man inclined his head. Where are we? He looked around at the room, the dresser, the stone walls. This wasn't one of the hostels. Back in the city, Karina said. How? Tibbs looked at himself again. We carried you back, Jekyll answered. No, how am I still alive? I fell to the bottom. You didn't, the man said. I tried to catch you. Karina sat on the edge of the bed, holding Tibbs's hand. But you were moving so fast. The air was so thin, she trailed off. She nudged you closer to the cleft, Jekyll said, and Tibbs vaguely remembered the wind tumbling him in that direction. A worry he'd hit it. So you landed on a ledge. I climbed down and brought you back up. Just so you know, I don't like heights, so do appreciate what I did. Jekyll grinned. We made a stretcher from the branches and carried you down the mountain, Karina added. Once we were here, I called for... She looked at the cleric as if realizing something. The man smiled. Call me Paul. Thank you, Tibbs said, then bit his lower lip. How do I repay you? There is no need. Tibbs narrowed his eyes. The street had taught him better than to believe that, and the guild had only reinforced it. It's okay, Tibbs, Karina said. I called in a favor. Tibbs looked at Jackal, who shrugged. How did a cleric owe a favor to Karina? Paul patted Tibbs' shoulder. Since you are awake and well, I will take my leave. Karina hugged the man. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so very much. The cleric hesitated, looking at Tibbs, then Jackal, before wrapping his arms around her. You are welcome, child. It was a worthwhile way to unburden myself of my debt. He leaned in closer to her ear and whispered, Be patient with them, Karina. They'll understand your decision one day. And remember, we are not all angry with you. I'll continue reminding them that you are making us all proud in your own way. It was so soft. It was soft enough, Tibbs wasn't sure Jackal heard. Karina escorted the priest. Yeah, priest is not a term that I use. Cleric. It's there because at that point I hadn't worked out uh, how I was going to go with the cleric priest kind of thing. Carino escorted the cleric out of the room, and Tibbs looked at the fighter. She didn't say anything about him, he said, and I'd be an ass to insist she tell us. He smiled. You, on the other hand, aren't hiding anything from us, so feel free to demand away. Tibbs shrugged, unsettled by the lack of even memory of the pain. I don't have anything to hide. I don't have anything, he added. Jackal snorted. You used to not have anything, Karina said, returning. Now you have us. Jackal nodded meaningfully toward her, and Karina raised an eyebrow. Tibbs thought about it. If I force her to tell me, I'm forcing you too. To his surprise, Jackal looked like he was considering it. Please don't, Karina said. I'm not ready to talk about Paul. But he's a relative of yours, right? Jackal asked. So he had heard some of it. Her lips tightened. She looked at the door. It's not that simple. Jackal laughed. Having a colorful history must come with being able to survive a dungeon. Tibbs looked at the man, wondering if he realized what he implied about himself. My history isn't colorful, Tibbs said. He bent his leg, expecting pain or just aches, before turning and putting his feet on the floor. Pants? He asked, not seeing them. You're the youngest person to be made into a dungeon runner, Karina said. I'm not, Tibbs replied, taking the pants Jackal handed him. Really? The fighter asked. Who else survived this long while being younger than you? They didn't survive, but they were sent to the dungeon. He tried to figure out again how he felt about that, but while he believed Bardic, it was too abstract. It was a story he was told. He knew he should be angry at the guild doing it, but he had more real reason for his anger. He stood and cinched the belt. Youngest to survive, then. Tibbs moved around the room, stretched, and twisted his body. Feel like I was never hurt. He located his shirt on the dresser and shoes next to it. Cleric healing does that, she said. Purity Essence doesn't just fix injuries, it makes things right. She shrugged. I don't know how to explain it any better. I'm not a cleric. All right. What do we do now? Jekyll asked. Do we look for another mountain? He thought about something and shuddered. Maybe we just look for a tall building instead. There are pretty damn tall towers in the city. Tibs smiled. We don't need to. He opened his hand toward the fighter and used his air essence to create a burst at him. He tried to keep hold of the essence, as he did for Earth when he sent it to the ground and shape it, but it slipped between his mental fingers, leaving as the air moved toward Tibs. It was hardly anything, but it had the fighter on his feet in surprise. How? How did it work? Tibs shrugged, gauging how much of his essence the puff of air had used up. Nearly all of it. Maybe Karina helped me with the air long. Maybe Karina kept me in the air longer this time? No, she replied. My reserve wasn't full when I tried it. I barely nudged you before I was drained. Tibs tried to remember anything as he put his shirt on, but he'd been so scared. All I know is that I wish you'd mention how annoyingly playful air is. Sorry, she said, chuckling, but you got your element, right? Is anything different? Only that I have a small reserve for air. Water said nothing would happen until I had all four elements. Jekyll sighed. I am not looking forward to setting up your audience with fire. I buried you alive, you fell off a cliff. Are we going to have to throw you into a bonfire? Maybe we can think about that another time, Karina asked. I'd like to enjoy our vacation now that we've accomplished our goal. Goal. Tibs cursed. What? Jekyll asked. He cursed again, mentally this time. He looked at the bracelet, still yellow. How much time did I cost you? Jekyll looked at Karina questioningly. She shrugged. You didn't cost us any time, Tibs. This was for me, but it wasn't supposed to take that long. You were supposed to have time to enjoy yourself. Jekyll chuckled. I spent 2 days with Crow and his family. I definitely enjoyed myself. You should see them pester him about everything you should have. That's in the you should have seen them. Pester him about everything we got up to. That family has no shame whatsoever. Being around drunks all the time probably has something to do with that, Karina said. Maybe. And while you were unconscious here, I did go back to town for a few days. For a day. I told Crow you took a tumble, but that you're okay. And Tibs, this was for us too. Whatever this element is, if it takes an audience with 4 of them to make it work, it's going to be powerful. So making sure you get it will help the whole team. Okay, but my part is done, Tibs said, putting his shoes on. He avoided focusing on them. Since we don't know how long we still have, the rest is yours. The rest of it is yours. Works for me. Jekyll headed for the door. What do you two want to do? I thought you'd want to go do your own thing, Tibs said casually. If not for attempting to get Jekyll to go away, he'd point out to him this was how you didn't draw attention to yourself. Jekyll snorted. Tibs, with our luck, we need to stick together. Don't you want to spend more time with Krosef? Karina asked. I'd love to, Jekyll replied, but he's in the town where Hard Knuckle is. Plural. Where Hard Knuckles is. He noticed I was there, and if I hadn't run for the platform, I'm certain I'd be in a cell right now. What did you do? She asked suspiciously. Nothing. I was heading back from enjoying Crow's company. Nothing. I was just heading back from enjoying Crow's company. Hard Knuckles an ass, and I was in town while he's still making changes. That's all it takes with him. What were you thinking of doing, Karina? She thought about it. Well, I thought I'd find out where the library is, see how I gain entrances, maybe. No, Jekyll interrupted. That's work. Jekyll, I'm a sorcerer. I have to do research. You're a dungeon runner, he replied. You need to rest. This is a vacation. I forbid you to go anywhere close to books. How about I spend my time teaching you two how to read and write? Tibs groaned, and Jekyll gagged. You will have to learn, she said. You can't depend on me to do all the reading. Noted, Jekyll said, so we make sure the last 2 members of our teams also know their letters. Jekyll, she said in exasperation. Maybe you were street, still am. No, you're a dungeon runner. You're a guild member, an adventurer. You're going to be dealing with nobility. Oh, I hope not. I hate those, the fighter said. Fine town elders, then. She replied. Who will expect you to be able to read contracts for what they want you to do? Jekyll smiled. You're still going to be part of my team, she sighed. Tibs, how about you? You're more sensible than the fighter. Tibs looked at his shoes, focused on them until the weave appeared. This was almost mundane by now. How would it be to look in a book and understand that? How hard would it be? Trying to understand numbers still gave him headaches. He bit his lower lip. I'd like to, Carrie turned to Jekyll in his victory, but it's going to be so hard. The fighter grinned at her. She sighed. All right, it isn't easy, but it's worth it. Jekyll snorted and she glared at him. How about you, Tibs? Jekyll asked instead of acknowledging it. You are fun-loving. What do you want to do? He closed his eyes. He didn't want them around while he did what Bardic told him to. Because he didn't want them around while he didn't want them around while he did what Bardic told him to, because he didn't know if it was going to be bad. But short of telling them he didn't want to be with them, which would only make them suspicious. Tibbs did like being with them as much as he could. He had to include them. I want to see the sea up close, he said, and look at the shops. I could do with some shopping, Jekyll said. Find something nice for Crow. He looked at Karina. I'm not spending money in a shop, she stated, but I will keep you two company. Make sure you don't get in trouble. She looked at Jekyll. The fighter pointed to Tibbs. He's the rogue, he said defensively. But you're the child, she replied. Tibbs chuckled as Jekyll fought for a worthy reply and didn't find one. He looked at Tibbs. I thought you were on my side. He grinned at the fighter. I'm a rogue. I'm on my side. And this concludes chapter 32 of Bottom Rung. If you are enjoying this, please subscribe, hit the bell, share with your friends and strangers. If you want to read the story, it is on Royal Road, the link of which is in the notes, along with the link to my Patreon if you want to support me. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.